Okay, so this is how we're going to take some notes. You'll find it helpful because you can pause and rewind and you can stop and you can go at your own speed, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. So as you're watching these videos, please take out your Chapter 1 notes right here, which you received in class. And at the same time, take out your Chapter 1 test booklet, which has the vocabulary pages across the front. By now, we should have already highlighted the keywords, words that make the definitions special. And you should be looking at that as I explained to you how to fill in some of the notes. Keep this to the side and take your notes and turn to section 1-1. Write in this section title, Understanding Points, Lines, and Planes, and pause anytime you need to write things down if I'm going too fast or whatever. This is worth 1 point when I collect notes, just making sure that you have a title for the section and you know exactly what the section is talking about. Okay, looking at your vocabulary words, you don't have to write out a whole new definition because you already have that. What we're going to do is just focus on what's important about it. So a point, what's important about a point is that it has no length, no dimensions, it's just a location. So draw a diagram of just a point. And to label it, you call it any letter that's capital that you want. We're going to say capital P. So to label it or name it, all you do is call it P. Some people put the word point in front, but you don't have to. A line looks like this. Let me use a real line here. A line looks like this, and it has 2 arrows that show that it keeps going. Lines have infinite number of points all along the way, but in order to give it a name, you need at least 2. So let's just choose the letters X and Y. In order to label it correctly, you use 2 capital letters that are on the line X, Y, and you put a line across the top that has 2 arrows. It's really important that you remember the arrows because otherwise it's not a line anymore, it's a segment. Collinear. Collinear, as you saw in the vocabulary pages, the main word, the base word there is line. So it's 3 points that form a line. 2 points might form a line, but 3 points makes it collinear. Now, these are points. It's not a line, it's 3 points that make a line. So any 3 letters they want M, N, Q. Okay, in order to label it, you're labeling 3 separate collinear points. So you want to call them M, comma, N, comma, Q, because they're 3 totally separate points. It's not a line, it's 3 points that are collinear. A plane, if you're looking back at your definitions, a plane is 2-dimensional. So we draw it like this. And we put the dotted lines around the edges to show that it's extending on and on forever. Okay? Planes can be labeled with capital script letters like this. It's not a regular M or R or P. It's a fancy one. Okay, so we can call this plane R. Make sure it's a fancy R there. That'll go up like that. Or we can use any 3 points that are in it. And these points have to be non-collinear. They have to be 3 points that don't make a line. Otherwise, it's not really considered the same plane. So whatever we want to call this, X, Y, Z, we are going to name this plane X, Y, Z. Now notice there's no commas in between because I'm not just talking about the points, I'm talking about the whole plane. But coplanar is different because coplanar are 3 separate points that form a plane, that are on a plane. So the coplanar points are X, comma, y, comma, z. These are just points. Coplanar points are right here, but the plane itself is labeled without commas. It's got to have 3 letters or else a fancy capital script letter. Okay, 4 more to go. Just want you to be familiar with how to fill in notes and all that. A segment is different than a line. Think in your mind right now how a segment can be different from the line that we did already. You should have come up with the fact that a segment does not have arrows. It doesn't keep going. Segments have endpoints. No arrows that keep going and going and going. It starts here, it ends here. So let's use the letters D, E. That's the segment. Okay, it can be named several different ways. You can either use DE or ED. The order doesn't matter. What matters is that you put a segment bar across the top with no arrows. That's the name of the segment. But to name an endpoint, you're just labeling points, not a segment. So you just need 2 points. Think about which point you would use as an endpoint. You can either use endpoint D or endpoint E. There's no bar across the top. You're just labeling point D or point E. Array is a segment with 1 arrow. Starts here and goes this way. Or it could go to the left. It doesn't matter. Array has 1 endpoint and 1 side that keeps going and going and going. Now the labeling of this one is really important. Let's use the letters K and L. When you're going to name array, the endpoint has to be labeled first. It doesn't matter which direction it's going. You have to find the one that doesn't have an arrow. The K goes first, and you pick any letter that the arrow is going through. So in this case, it's L. But when you label it, you draw a bar with 1 arrow. And in this case, you always draw it to the right, just when you're labeling it. Think about what opposite rays mean. Opposite means that they're 2 rays that are going apart from each other. So you can have 1 ray going this way. It has an endpoint right here. And in order to be considered a ray that's opposite to that, you would have to have a ray that's going the opposite direction. So let's go with green. They form a straight line. They start at the exact same endpoint and then go away from each other. That's what opposite rays are. To name it, you need to have a name for each ray. So let's call this A, and the red ray, let's say it goes to B, and the green one, let's say it goes to C. So you have to find 2 different rays to be opposite rays. It's plural. So we're going to name the red one. Now I know that it's going off to the left, so it doesn't matter though. What matters is that you find the one that doesn't have an arrow going through it, and that's the A. So you start with A, and then you go this way towards the arrow till you find another point, point B, and you label it with an arrow going to the right. Even though it looks like it's going to the left, it doesn't matter. You start with the end point and you go towards the arrow. And the ray that's opposite to it is the green one. So to go back and label the green one, which letter would you start with? You would not start with the C because it's going through the C. You start at the A because it's ending on the A. That's the end point. So it's A, and then you go towards the arrow till you find a point, point C. Those are opposite rays, and that's the way that you label them. Okay, so that's mostly it for notes. Tomorrow in class, we're going to talk about real-life representations of points out in the real world, lines and segments, rays. Those are kind of tricky. Think about that before you come to class tomorrow. Planes out in the real world, not the flying kind, but the geometrical planes, and intersection, what intersections look like out in the real world. So think about those. Maybe write a couple down before you get to class tomorrow. And also tomorrow we're going to be doing the back of the page where we practice naming things. So we're going to look at this line and see how many possible names we could come up for it. And this one, think about all the different possible names. This one should have a fancy M. We'll fix that tomorrow. This is an intersection of some kind. Two lines are intersecting, so see if you can think of ways to name that one. And this one has a whole lot of things going on, intersections and planes and everything. Okay, so for tomorrow, make sure that you have everything written down that I wrote on the screen. But everything that I left blank, you can leave it blank until we discuss it tomorrow in class. All right, thank you. Have a good night.